the main barn building in those lower bays, and slight alterations in terms of fenestration, a few new openings there too. Moving on, you've got Heath Barn Cottage. Oh, sorry, that's the internals. But that's obviously there. You've got the photo internally of the stage area that's going to be removed, and the mezzanines effectively being constructed in that area of the building. And then you've got the existing timber frame within which roof lights will be inserted. Limited number on either side. There, I think it's one. Heath Barn Cottage, there's probably very limited changes there too, with a focus on the removal of modern additions as appropriate. Again, you can show on the next slide the extent of works being removed on that site, and effectively you've got new windows and doors either side of the ground floor. You've got a removal of internal fittings, but essentially you're keeping the main plan format of that completely intact as per the original cottage. Externally, you've got the same format, so there's items being removed in red and additions shown in blue. So these are the northern elevation. So again, we were looking at that modern lean-to on that side of the building where you've got that. You've got changes occurring to the glazed openings there, and you've got infilling of various panels and no clear glass being inserted in the others. You've got the addition of a couple of Velux windows on that elevation and some new windows in the end there. As the southern elevation, as you face the St.Johns Road effectively, you've got replacement of doors. Just highlighting the central section there, you've got the removal of a section of boundary wall to provide a pedestrian link way through to the internal courtyard. And again, that's showing obviously the new windows at the top there, Velux windows and the new doors and the new gates on the bottom there. Alterations to the east and west elevations as you look at the property. So again, you're showing a replacement door, a couple of new openings on the western elevation, and infilling of panels on the lean-to section. And again, what's being replaced on that elevation and the extent of the new works. Inside the courtyard itself, you've got, as I say, the entranceway on the northern courtyard elevation. So you've got one of those outbuildings being used as a bin store, one of those being used as a cycle store, and you've got a new pedestrian gate going through. You've also got a new window there on the rear side as well. On the southern side of the property, you've got the removal of a lean-to extension to that building, and the removal of a couple of existing openings and alterations to form a new opening there too. And again, that's showing the additions on the courtyard side. So that window is obviously coming out and having a new door, effectively adding at the top right-hand side. And you've got obviously alterations to the fenestration on the southern courtyard elevation. So that's the existing condition of the single-storey buildings on the front, St.Johns Road side of the property, as seen from the courtyard. So you're going to have a gated entrance in that boundary wall there, and very little changes effectively to the main building itself. Those are the eastern courtyard and the western courtyard elevations respectively. Again, the extent of new openings being formed, the lean-to addition being removed on the top there. Very little changes on the western courtyard side. And again, it's been replaced by sympathetic openings on the east courtyard elevation. And that's a photograph effectively taken across that corner of the, so it would be the eastern elevation in the main of the courtyard, with the southern elevation on the right-hand side and the northern elevation, St.Johns Road, on the right-hand side, left-hand side. So there's a general overview of what the proposed ground and first floor layouts will result in. And that's the proposed site layout. So again, you've got, see the bin and cycle storage on the frontage. You've got the individual residential units in terms of Heath Barn farmhouse on the right-hand side and a parking area associated with that. You've got Heath Barn cottage on the left-hand side with associated parking at the rear of the site. And obviously the complex buildings, which are barn buildings being converted into 3 units, all of which would have access onto that internal courtyard area, which would be retained effectively as a shared amenity area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Robert. Now, before we go to the speakers, what I failed to do at the beginning was to introduce Adele Stapleton here on my left, who's here to keep us on the straight and narrow legally, and Kaylee Johnson here, who is normally here just to make sure the minutes and all that get done, but tonight she is also the IT help desk. Right. Right. So let's move on to the speakers. Councillor Allen.
So this building is a much loved listed building, 16th century suite of farmhouse and agricultural buildings around a courtyard. This is a rarity for listed farm buildings, and there are not many in this area or indeed the region. The listing is for the building's group value, i.e. their integrity as a whole. To break them up and subdivide the courtyard would undermine the social and heritage value of the site. The bulk of the buildings are two barns, i.e. not residential. The cottage is actually a subdivision of one of the barns and would probably not get planning these days on the listed building consent. Adaptations to the exterior, particularly the courtyard, will interfere with the integrity of the whole. Adaptations to the interior will damage original rafters and walls. We saw that magnificent woodwork inside the building. Imagine putting the insulation required to put the housing up to a standard of modern environmental performance. And that is much greater than is required for a public building that is not slept in overnight. The soundproof windows required to offset the noise from the Mugger and Hemel School's 3G sports pitch will not be in keeping with a listed building. The double glazing permitted at 55 to 65 St.Johns Road, the nearest listed buildings in the area, only enabled 12mm heritage panes, which have limited environmental value in retaining heat and keeping out noise. On the farmhouse side, the lighting for the Mugger and 3G sports pitch, as well as the noise involved, will not be conducive for residential use. The limited amenity, much of it shared, will not be attractive to buyers, as will the fact that many of the windows will be overlooking each other, often within the required 22 metres, compromising privacy. It is out of keeping with the surroundings, neighboured by a theatre, school, sports centre, church, open space and cricket club, all public amenities, lending the site to being part of this public arena, rather than a residential enclave. In view of these weaknesses, I'm not convinced development will attract the prices that 3 to 4 bedroom dwellings can usually expect in the area, bringing the viability of a housing scheme into question. This is key, because viability, particularly the usage, minimising change to the integrity of the heritage space, is a key factor that needs to be considered for listed building consent, as outlined in best practice by Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, Historic England's documents on the adaptive reuse of traditional farm buildings, and the British Standard Institute Standard 7913 Guide to the Conservation of Historic Buildings. Closure of Boxmoor Hall has been raised. It closed as an arts centre in 2004, and it states because it lost funding, not because of a loss of demand or need. Availability of nearby alternatives is highlighted, but this is limited to church halls suitable for ad hoc use, rather than sustained tenancy required by an arts centre. Bands used to have access to practice areas in Boxmoor Hall. There is still a demand for this. One local youth band I know of has to practice in St Albans. Heath Barn, with no residential properties around it, would be ideal for such practice, as Boxmoor Hall had been before houses were built around it. There's been no community consultation to see whether Boxmoor Hall analysis still holds. The engagement of our Heath Barn clearly shows there is appetite for a community arts facility. NPPF 2024 Clause 214 states that public benefit and community use need to be considered before change of use to housing. Policy HC6 of the Emerging Local Plan states, I quote, proposals that would result in the loss or change of use of existing community, cultural, leisure, recreation or health facilities will only be permitted in exceptional circumstances. It carries on, paragraph 10.30 of the Emerging Local Plan, quotes, we support the involvement of residents and businesses in the long-term management and stewardship of community assets to help deliver the social objectives of sustainable development by building community capacity, cohesion and identity. Changing Heath Barn to residential will lose all of that enormous cultural and community capital. In conclusion, there are strong cultural heritage, community and utilitarian case for this building not being carved up into housing units. There will doubtless be fears of appeal if this is refused, but I would be horrified if Herts County Council takes a refusal to appeal rather than fully and thoroughly explore the potential of the community case put forward by our Heath Barn And I humbly request that this committee refuses this application until such an assessment has been conducted in a balanced and consultative manner by HCC. This is a public asset, and HCC has a public duty to undertake this before selling it for housing. Thank you.
Good timing. Thank you. Now we have Lisa Timms. You have 4 minutes.
Press the right hand button.
Honouring cherished places like Heath Barn and saving them intentionally for the use of the community sends a clear message to local people that they are deserving and worthy of using them. Heath Barn has successfully nurtured a rich mix of educational, social and community life for decades. In beautifying the barn for housing, behind iron gates for the eyes and enjoyment of the affluent few, we miss an opportunity for local people to connect, engage with and crucially steward the much-loved heritage of our town. Our development appraisal of the residential scheme shows it to be financially unviable. The claim that housing offers the most public benefit and optimum viable use is therefore flawed and prematurely dismisses a sympathetic community alternative, one that works with the current building layout, retains the original barn spaces, and remains mindful of the long-term maintenance and viability. Residential use should always be the last resort when converting historic buildings, given this option almost always creates the most harm. Our heritage architect, surveyor and consultant have also shared serious concerns about approving a housing scheme with no clear financial gains. Our Heath Barn is championing a sustainable solution that is not only beautifully packaged, but bound in the values of inclusion, empathy and kindness, trailblazing arts, well-being, social prescribing and intergenerational initiatives, creating a thriving hub to gather, one that seeks to build connection and strengthen bonds. We can trust in the strength of old buildings accustomed to helping people feel like they belong, and we can trust in local people to respectfully build on the barn's legacy. A community ownership model involves local people buying shares in a building to enable its purchase, alongside heritage funding to assist in a simpler, gradual conversion, boosted with revenue from the higher spaces. In an attempt to refresh talks with County earlier this year, I emailed them the details of the work surrounding our proposals, including the community ownership suggestion. I raised concerns regarding the residential viability and requested an in-person meeting. I'm still awaiting a reply. Earlier emails from County suggested they were under pressure to deliver best value, that they wouldn't delay their plans to consider our proposals, and we could bid once the property went to open market. So this is what we intend to do, albeit not from the more favourable position as a recognised asset of community value. As the applicant will know, an advanced plan takes time and resources, which proves difficult without clarity on expectations around sale value. Our time and energy has been much better spent on our own due diligence, expanding our reach through events, building trust and confidence, and raising awareness to ensure a strong, supportive foundation to launch this ambitious project. We have a 400+ strong subscriber list of engaged supporters, a portfolio of organisations and businesses keen to collaborate, over £30,000 in pledges, and a community eager to get involved. This time has been invaluable, helping us shape and refine our proposals, identify opportunities and risks, and demonstrate the clear need for community spaces. It all helps to evidence support for the project, storytelling its creation, something big grant funders love to see. While eligible for funding, we are restricted from applying while not being the asset owners, and County will know this. The new local plan encourages active local stewardship and community ownership of assets, and this is mirrored with the Community Empowerment Bill being developed in central government, strengthening belief that custodians of our special places should be those who love them and know their community needs best. Please do not underestimate the importance of saving special places for seemingly insignificant and light exchanges. These interactions speak in the best of Hemel people, an insight into our strength of spirit, character and heart. Enlivening Heath Barn's legacy by involving the community has the ability to anchor us to place.
Thank you.
Oh, I see.
Speaking in support is Claire Ewing.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. These proposals will deliver a viable long-term solution for the preservation of these much cherished heritage assets, and their renovation will have a positive impact on the locality. The site is in a sustainable urban location, suitable for housing, and the proposals return 2 of the buildings back to their original residential use, as well as making a small but important contribution to housing delivery. Overall, the scheme is policy compliant and has been scrutinised in detail by relevant consultees. The education use has been re-provided with a new purpose-built facility within the school. There is no policy requirement, therefore, to deliver an alternative community use at this site. HCC understands the strength of local feeling and has been quite willing to engage with our Heath Barn group, allowing them to access the buildings to support their work on their own proposals. However, no concrete proposals with a costed business plan have been presented for HCC to consider. The county are bound by statute to secure best value for any asset they dispose of, and in this case, the sale is linked to replenishing funds expended to deliver the new music centre. The proposals have been carefully considered by a team of architects with heritage input and structural engineers. During the course of the application, we were able to meet with the Conservation Officer and the Planning Officer on site, and as a result of these discussions, amendments were made which have further improved the design and how it works with the existing structure and features. As a result, the Conservation Officer considers that a residential use is the most appropriate for this listed building. Whilst the Conservation Officer identified some harm will result from the proposals, this harm is classified as less than substantial, and in this circumstance, the NPPF guides that this harm must be weighed against the public benefits. The case officer has concluded that the public benefits outweigh this identified harm. It is recognised that the scheme will not necessarily deliver conventional accommodation that will be achieved in a standard new build, but not everyone wants to live in a standard new build. This scheme will deliver unique spaces, restoring and exposing original features and enabling some of the less sympathetic functional additions to be removed. Recent engagement with local agents has continued to reassure HCC that the proposals will deliver attractive, desirable homes that will generate the income required to deliver the project. The case officer has proposed a number of conditions which require further detail to be submitted and approved to ensure that the value of the historic features are retained and protected. This should give you comfort that this scheme will be delivered in the right way. Approving this application does not prevent a community-led proposal bidding on the site when it comes to market, but I draw you back to the obligation that HCC has to secure best value for all disposals and secure a long-term viable use for the site, which these proposals do. You have the opportunity this evening to take a positive step forward in preserving the future of these buildings. Any further delay will just add to the continued cost of securing and maintaining the buildings and will result in future uncertainty in relation to their long-term future. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, over to you.
I think Councillor Bromans first.
I have several questions. Could a condition be applied to require continuity of access to the playhouse fire exit along the driveway of the site?
I'm not entirely convinced that that condition would necessarily meet the tests for the application of the planning conditions, although it would be something obviously we could discuss with the applicants.
I would hope, considering considering it is the Hertfordshire County Council that is the landowner, that they would endeavour to do that and to come to the appropriate arrangement with the buyers. If these permissions are granted for residential use, could the owners, the Hertfordshire County Council, still decide on a different purpose and then apply for such planning permission if the democratic leadership of the council decided that?
Yes, obviously there are, the county as owner is capable of making whatever planning applications they see fit to do so in relation to this site. In terms of planning and listed building applications, as with any successor in title, it doesn't preclude community use of the building, it merely puts it down, I would suggest, in terms of priority.
I think this question was largely answered by the last speaker. There was a concern raised by Cullen, an objection about British Standard 9713, Guide to the Conservation of Historic Buildings. The main thrust of that in section 5.7 was that full options appraisal should be carried out before the change of use of a historic building is done. I think we got that reply from Claire Newbury just now, and I presume that that could still continue, considering who the landowner is. To so that's a statement rather than a question. Regarding the noise concerns expressed by some, it seemed clear to me that the predominant noise was not from the mugger and the play spaces, but rather from the road, and therefore, is that noise from the play areas and the lights from the floodlighting still a concern in terms of residential use?
Yeah, and no, we've given quite careful consideration to the impact of the mugger on residential amenity as set out in paragraph 8.59 onwards. Road traffic noise is not perceived to be a significant issue within that locality, and certainly not something that we consider to be harmful to amenity.
So just to say that from my point of view here, it would be heartbreaking to see these buildings ruined by neglect, and therefore it would be better to preserve that heritage by using them for residential use than to have them continue to be unused.
Right, that's an observation. Councillor Hobson.
Thank you. I think it's a bit of a shame that I feel like the wrong people are in the room. I think a lot of this seems to be a discussion that should be being had with the community group and the Herts County Council. And of course, this is one stage that's planning, and we as the committee have to look at this on material planning reasons and whether it meets all of their planning criteria, or whether we have any concerns about that. So it just feels a bit awkward, but we are where we are. We've got a planning application in front of us, and we need to make a decision on that. I just had a few questions. So one around amenity space. Is the officer aware of any examples of relatively substantial family homes in Dacorum where they don't have their own garden and it's a shared space? So something like a maisonette or something, that's quite common, but this seems to be quite an unusual situation. I do accept that it's because it's the listed building and it's to preserve the character, but I just wondered, are there any examples in Dacorum of significant family homes with significant amount of bedrooms where they share gardens that might help us in our decision making on amenity?
I can't think of any. Obviously, what you've got here is, quite close facilities for, recreational activities. Obviously, you're opposite the common, and you're next door to mugger, which effectively can provide, that family kind of spaces, enjoyment that you would typically expect from larger properties.
I'm sure you'd use the mugger for a private family barbecue, but yes, I can kind of see what I was just really helping me in decision making. In the report or in the presentation, you talk about revised mugger times, but and it was IE rather than EG, 6 p.m. on a Sunday. So does that mean the only change to the mugger times is that they can't do activities after 6 p.m. on a Sunday, but they would be able to do it in the evenings? My concern there is really much more about we want to make the best use of that space. With everyone active and stuff, and the money that the council gets from that, I wouldn't want that to be curtailed because there's a residential development next door. So just thinking about that. Could you just confirm what the impact on the mugger times is?
Yeah, so the mugger itself is, I think, conditioned to 10 o'clock on most days of the week. It's obviously for school use as a preference up till 6 p.m. And that would continue, with the only change effectively being on that Sunday, where we've reduced the time that would be available.
Okay, thank you. So people who normally would use it on a Sunday, I guess we don't have the information about how many people this would impact, but so it is only the Sunday that you can't use it in the evening, which is a bit random. But anyway, okay, thank you. And then another question I had was, will the environmental requirements, so sort of a couple of discussions about that if you are turning it into residential, it will need to be, there will need to be some insulation and things like that. Although of course the windows will still have to be single paned, etc. So just some reassurance that the environmental requirements won't damage the heritage to a certain point, because obviously there's a balance that needs to be met, and it's just, is the economic need to maximise the output for this and protect or keep the listed building in a better shape? Does that outweigh the environmental compromises that will need to be made compared to a new build?
Yeah, so in section 5.5, right at the end of that, I do talk about the thermal insulation of the dwellings, and that will be undertaken in accordance with the historic English publication, Energy Efficiency in Historic Buildings, which outlines how, effectively Part L of building regs can be amended for traditional buildings. But nonetheless, you can still provide insulation.
Yeah. I just sort of thinking out loud, just on the balance there. And could you just confirm, when we talk about Herts County Council getting the best value, are they selling the land with planning permission, or is their intention to do the construction work and then sell the individual plots, because that does have an impact, I think, on my assessment anyway of viability and or the highest value that council will get for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the full details on that. Obviously, that's one for the county. I imagine they would sell it with planning permission in place.
Okay, because that obviously is different to the individual plots, because there is an example in Boxmoor of a development. It's an over 55s development at the end of Green End Road, and some of those plots maybe still be there. They're 2 and 3 bedroom, they're 2-bedroom apartments, 3-bedroom houses going for 800,000. And I think there are still, if there aren't still some empty after 5, 6 more years, some of them were empty for many, many years after that. So in that area, and that's a similar situation. Admittedly, it's for retired people, not for family people, but they do have gardens and stuff. So it's just very much in my mind on the viability, which I know has to be weighed against all the other things we need to talk about. But it's the family homes with, I have to say, when I talk about viability, I'm looking at this, the 2 biggest houses have absolutely tiny kitchens, and I know all of the interior could potentially change subject to listed building control and all of that. The open plan kitchen diners look a bit better size maybe, but for the size of house, the kitchens just look absolutely tiny. We've got a shared courtyard, and I do genuinely have, on material planning reasons, concerns about the lack of parking, because you've got, for the amount of bedrooms of all of these plots on a busy road where you can't park, it's a double yellow, no stopping. There are some public parking sort of along St.Johns Road opposite, but they're always full, and they're for the use of the mall as much as they are for residents. So I do have legitimate, I think, concerns about the lack of parking on that extremely busy road. So I don't know if the officer has anything he can add to that, anything he can say reassuringly about what are the options for parking. And I think in the report, just saying that people will use their bikes, as we know many times, that's not going to happen. So that's probably my biggest concern. My second biggest concern is the lack of amenity space, however pretty the courtyard is, and the practicality. And then the third concern is overall viability and the layout. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hobson. Councillor Williams.
No, I know I finished that as if I was, like, I just did have a question about the parking. Sorry, it was my fault. I warbled a little bit and said, okay, and then turned my microphone off.
So I mean, the only thing I can say about the car parking is obviously it does reflect the standards in the local plan and the car parking standard SPD. So we are where we are in terms of policy compliance on that element.
Thank you. That is what I heard you say. That is what's in the report, but maybe I just can't do the maths. It just seems a lot of bedrooms and only 12 spaces, but it's probably my maths. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, from what we see here this evening and what we've seen online prior to the meeting, there is quite a lot of significant local interest in this building. But we also see from the slides we've seen this evening that having been empty for 6 years, it's deteriorating at a significant rate. And I think it would be questionable whether the sort of significant sums of money that would be needed into 7 figures to A, purchase it and B, renovate it are realistic for a community use of this building. But even saying that, that is not what is before us this evening, and the role of this planning committee is to determine planning applications that it has before it, and on balance make a decision on whether a residential use of this building is a suitable alternative use to that which it had previously been used to, which is obviously educational. It's not been in any sort of community use for the last 6 years. Clearly, converting these sorts of listed buildings into residential comes with some caveats about it not being perfect in terms of modern living standards, but you can convert these buildings to a good standard. I think it's clear that residential conversion is the best short and probably long-term solution to securing the future of this collection of buildings. It doesn't preclude alternative uses should the county do that, but they do have a requirement to achieve best value for the disposal of an asset. And it will become available for bidding should someone else wish to use it for an alternative use. So on that basis, Chair, I'm not seeing anybody else indicating, I move that we support officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. We'll park that for the moment. Any further comments from anybody else? Councillor Mitchell.
In Councillor Williams, in William Allen's, statement, he mentioned the NPPF and a clause, I think it was 2.14. I'm not sure if I've remembered that correctly. I'd like some clarification around that point that he made. Thank you.
Councillor Williams, would like to state what the paragraph was?
It was 214. Do you want me to quote it?
Yeah, so paragraph 2.14 starts with where the proposed development would lead to substantial harm to the designated heritage asset. I think it is clear from our presentation and from the comments of the Conservation Officer that the proposal results in less than substantial harm. So it doesn't actually apply in terms of the following items, which should include obviously the viable use, but it's only applicable where there is clear harm. And in this case, our argument is that it's not substantially harmful to the listed building in any event. Moving further on from that, I would like to clarify around policy CS23, which is the Borough Council's policy in relation to social community infrastructure. That policy only seeks to prevent the loss of community facilities where there isn't a satisfactory alternative being provided, which is obviously the case in the education authorities' hands, that they have provided the music facilities elsewhere. It does state a preference for other community uses, but we have found from determinations in the case of Boxmoor Arts Centre and alike, the preference is not a significant ground for refusal. It's unfortunately not something we could hang a refusal of a planning application on. The policy wording in the new emerging strategy is obviously far more beneficial to protect community assets, but we do obviously have to determine it on the planning policy at present.
Yeah, I'm concerned that there isn't a suitable alternative for a community hub in Boxmoor that I'm aware of, unless I'm missing something.
So it's only the protection of the use of what that building was. So the social community use of that building was educational purposes, and that use has been accommodated upon the school site. So we don't have a policy argument to refuse it on lots of community facilities. That obviously may change with the emerging policies, which were quoted by Councillor Allen and Lisa Timms, but we are obviously determining it in accordance with the current planning policy, with very little weight applied to the emerging policy.
I mean, I do find it disappointing that HCC haven't fully appraised all potential options for the use of the building. Where do we stand in that regard?
Well, we can't force them under the policy to consider alternatives. They have submitted a planning application which needs to be determined.
Councillor Hobson.
I'll be very brief. I mean, whatever the determination this evening, which is clearly going to be on planning grounds, which can't, for the reasons just said, take into account a lot of the very valid concerns that have been raised. But I just to say a real plea to HCC to if there are, irrespective of this decision tonight, if they could engage with the community people just to see what those options are. And I say that without prejudice to making a decision on planning, because I see the two things as very separate. But I do think it's a shame that this has come here without pretty much echoing what Councillor Mitchell said, that without those discussions actually coming to a fruition. But thank you.
Any other further comments from members? Right, in which case, we've got a proposer by Councillor Williams to accept officer's recommendation, subject to the minor changes to the conditions. And planning permission be delegated with a view to approval. So officers proposer, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Roman, right, so proposed and seconded. Can I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in favour. Those against? 1. So 5 in favour, 1 against. The recommendation is carried. Sorry. Abstentions? 1, 2, 3. 3 abstentions. It's a 5-1-3. Thank you very much.
Chair, we do need to take a vote on the listed building application as well.
Same again. Do I have a proposer for officer's recommendation for the listed building consent? Proposer, seconder for the listed building?
Well, given the decision of the committee on the first one, I can second it because listed building control goes alongside, so it doesn't.
All right, so Councillor Williams is proposing, Councillor Hobson is seconding on the listed building. Do I have a show of hands, please? Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in favour. Those against? 1. 1 against. Abstentions? 3. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, You're welcome to sit through the rest of the agenda if you wish, but feel free to go. We'll give ourselves maybe a couple of minutes until 10 past. IT.
Is she out there? She gone? Normally they sit out there, don't they?
Well done, William. Tough. No, they're in the pub across the road. They're in the pub across the road. I told them. It's going to take a little while. Right. Are we ready to roll on 5C? Right. The next item on the agenda is item 5C, which is submission of details on all matters reserved pursuant to the outline planning application 03266, land at West Hemel, Hempstead. Colin, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, as stated, the site is...
One moment. We've got...
Sorry, Chair. I'm Ward Councillor for Chiltern Moors End, and I did do my best to fight against this application, so I won't be voting.
Colin.
Thank you. So the application site is LA3, land west of Hemel Hempstead, and this is the final reserved matters pursuant to the outline planning permission that was granted in 2021. So this one's for a variety of infrastructure as shown in the slide there. So the community hub, which contains 45 dwellings, community provision, retail space, a lot of the open spaces in between the residential parcels, play areas for children, and we're considering the details of the appearance, landscaping, layout, and scale. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick one on the background. As we've seen before, there's been a long history of the sites being allocated and identified for development. I think the key is that in 2021, we granted 350 homes in detail with another 750 granted outline planning permission. Through the previous two reserved matters, we've already considered 705 of those 750 homes. So this application includes 45 apartment blocks within the community hub. Next slide, please. So on the right, you've just got the overall site roughly outlined in red in the satellite view, and on the left, you've got a location plan. So the application areas, the sort of white areas in between all those light grey areas, which are the residential parcels we previously considered. And then phase one is on the right-hand side of the site, the darker grey shaded area. And again, it's just outlining the application areas, so we're looking at the areas in red at the moment. We're just going to skip through these plans very quickly as we've seen them before, but we can also sort of come back to them with any questions. They're just the parameter plans that were approved under the outline permission. So this is the land use parameter plan, movement parameter plan, the green infrastructure parameter plan, the hydrology parameter plan, and this is the overall site plan. So we're considering a lot of the sort of green areas around those residential parcels. We're also considering the community hub, which is sort of outlined in red rectangles just adjacent the primary school land, which is coloured yellow. So that contains the 45 dwellings I mentioned and all the retail facilities. We're also considering the gypsy and traveller sites, which is in the south-western corner, bottom corner of the sites, and a lot of the other infrastructure associated to that, such as play provision, etc. So these are just the site photos. I think we'll just skip through quickly as well, as we've seen these site photos before. We can always come back if councillors request that. This is just from Chorlton Lane. That's going up the rights of way, the avenue on the right. Again, going up the right of way on the eastern side of the site. Looking down the northern boundary of the site. Further along the northern boundary. Looking into the site from Pouchan End Lane to the north. This is on the western side of the site, looking down south from Pouchan End Lane. This is the entrance to the rights of way going through the centre of the site. Again, further along, just looking south. Further along again, looking straight down the rights of way. This is looking south. Again, this is looking north from the rights of way. Further along, looking southeast, so you can see the existing properties in Chorlton in the distance. And this is looking south along the eastern boundary of the site. And this is along Chorlton Lane to the south of the site. So in the distance, you're looking towards Pouchan End Lane, the gypsy traveller site will be on the right-hand side. So this is the strategic landscape master plan. It's a bit closer up, focusing on the north of the site. The blue dots are where the site photos were taken from. Again, we're not looking at all the housing there, it's mainly the green areas in between the housing. So on the western boundary on the left, you can see some orange stars. That's a variety of trim trail equipment and gym fitness equipment, pathways along the whole western boundary. You've got a number of stud spacings which are numbered in white, numbers, which is quite difficult to see. But I think the main point is in this area of the site, there's some less accessible stud spacings in the centre, and there's a few with sort of retaining walls. And these ones would be more heavily landscaped, whereas other more accessible ones throughout the site would be less landscaped to allow entry into these. And as you can see, there's a number of footpaths and cycleways going along the boundaries of the site and through the centre of the site as per the movement parameter plan. And again, the community hub is just there in the centre of the site, just to the right-hand side of that yellow area of land, which would be the future school. And to the left of that community hub, you have a neighbourhood equipped area of play and a community garden. Next slide, please. This is the same plan, just the southern part of the site. So again, the blue dots are that rights of way where we saw those photographs from. Generally speaking, there's more accessible stud spacings in this area. Overall, there's like 19 stud spacings throughout the site, and 11 of those are deemed to be more accessible, and some have opportunities for informal play, so boulders, etc., for children. So this is the layout of the community hub. So going from the top left, you have the 70-bed care home with the private garden. Just to the top right of the care home in grey, adjacent to that private garden, you have a standalone apartment block which contains 6 one-bed apartments. If you go further to the right, to the large building in the centre, that is where the retail facilities, and community facilities at ground floor would be based, with 27 apartments above these, so a 4-storey building. If you go further to the right, you have another building which would contain a convenience store at ground floor with a further 12 apartments above this. Then if you go to the bottom of the plan, the pink building is a nursery with outdoor space to the rear of it. So these are the care home elevations. The top elevation would face northwards onto the primary streets. The bottom elevation would face west onto the private garden. We secured amendments for the care home. It included sort of more details, such as brick sills around some of the windows and sort of balconies to some of the communal areas. Then more elevations. The top elevation would face east onto that community garden we saw earlier, and the elevation at the bottom would face south onto sort of the community square and the parking area, so it's quite a prominent elevation, that one. And again, we secured amendments to the elevation here. These are the floor plans. Again, 70 beds. There's just quite a lot of community provisions. So ground floor, you have a bistro, cafe, and throughout all the floors, you sort of have day rooms, dining rooms, games rooms, libraries, etc. for the residents. And that's the second floor plan, which is again the same thing. You've got games rooms, cinema on that floor, various day rooms. This is that standalone apartment block with 6 one-bed apartments in it. Again, this was also amended following the amendments to the other apartment buildings we previously considered. So hit roof, terraces, some bricks, some stone sills around some of the windows to improve the visual appearance. Those are just the ground and first floor plans, so 6 one-bed apartments. This is the retail building and apartment elevations. So the top left is the front elevation, which faces onto the community square. Again, at ground floor, on the left-hand side, you have 3 retail spaces. On the right-hand side of the building, you would have the community facility. It's 4 stories overall, and again, we amended this elevation as well. We wrapped around on that front elevation some of those terraces on each side to bookend the ends of the building. The bottom right is the rear of the building that faces into the car parking area. So on the right-hand side of that, you have a 4th area, a more flexible unit, which would either be retail, medical, or community, depending on who takes it up. And those are just the floor plans. So on the right-hand side is community facility. Going left, you've got 3 retail units, and then the one at the rear is just the flexible unit. And these are just the floor plans. So you have 27 apartment blocks, 9 one-bed apartments, and 18 two-bed apartments in this block. There's an area there. So you've got the first floor, the ground floor, first floor, and the second floor. And this is the convenience store building. So it's a convenience store at ground floor. And again, you have a variety of 1 and 2 bed apartment blocks above this, 12 apartment blocks overall. And it's the same sort of concept as the building we just saw, those terraced areas bookended at the ends. The banding detail being carried over to the side elevations as well. Again, those are the floor plans, so convenience store, ground floor, with apartments above it, 12 apartments above. This is the nursery building elevations. We amended the plans in terms of the materials, so more rendering and cladding, and that was just to make it appear different to sort of all the other buildings we've seen. And these are the floor plans of the nursery. So on the first floor, you would have the preschool children, and on the ground floor, you would have toddlers and babies. And these are just some visuals. So this is a visual looking at that retail, the front of the retail building with the apartments above. To the left would be your care home. And this slide. This is looking at the rear of that retail building with the car parking area to the rear. To the left there is that convenience store building with apartments. This is, again, the front of the retail building. You can see the care home in the distance. Again, just another view. It's the retail building on the left and the convenience store building facing onto this with the nursery on the right-hand side. Just more of an aerial view there. This is a tenure plan. So, I mean, for this area of the site, we're just looking at the community hub, which is in the centre, just again above that yellow area, which is the primary school. So 45 affordable rented dwellings in total. Across the site, we've already considered the distribution of affordable housing. So the red is affordable rent and blue is shared ownership. And I think this plan is just to show that across most parts of the site, we've spread the affordable housing. And this is just the parking distribution for the community hub. So for the apartments, you've got 45 spaces plus an extra 6 visitor spaces in that parking square to the rear of the block. You have 19 parking spaces for the care home. In red in that community square, plus on the streets, you have 35 community square parking spaces. So that will be shared between sort of the retail and community facilities. And then in orange, you've got 9 nursery parking spaces. In addition to this, there's across that secondary street, you have 11 visitor spaces, and highways have confirmed that they would be adopting that road and they would seek to restrict the use of some of those visitor spaces, so most likely a time limit, so they would be available to people visiting the shops as well. This is the gypsy and traveller site layouts. It corresponds to what was shown at outline stage and indicative plans in the Section 1 agreement. So there would be room for 7 pitches, 2 parking spaces each with an outbuilding each. You would have a dedicated site access from Children Lane, which is approved under the Planning Commission, with a foul water pumping station. This is just a focus plan on the community garden and neighbourhood equipped area of play, so adjacent to the community hub. So you've got an orchard on the right-hand side there with community growing space, and on the left you've got the play area, so that was amended as well following comments from our open spaces officer. We just increased the amount of challenging play equipment in this area. And this is the landscape master plan. This is Pouchin End Park, which is that green strip going east to west in the southern part of the site. So on the left-hand side, you have the reptile receptor area, which was approved under the Planning Permission. Going right, you have quite a large sud spacing, which would be inaccessible, but we secured amendments to provide a footpath on the left-hand side of that to increase connectivity from the dwellings to the south. And then across the street, you have a local equipped area of play, and again, we amended that to include a bit more challenging play equipment, and then you've got open spaces, more accessible sud spacings, and the blue stars are interpretation boards, ecological interpretation boards for surrounding residents. And these are just some sections we've seen before, so these are through the centre of the site. I think this section on the bottom, RR, just shows that some of those sud spacings we just looked at are accessible due to the land levels. And this is another set we've seen before. This is in the north of the site, some of those less accessible basins which would have retaining walls, but they'll be more heavily landscaped. And this is the overall site plan again, so the details are recommended for approval subject to the conditions in the report and the completion of a unilateral undertaking relating to SANG and SAM mitigation. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Right. Who wants to start making the comments? Over to you, Councillor Hobson.
Well, I'll be very quick. It's really interesting to see this because I was on the committee when we approved the plan. And I think I would have preferred the access to the traveller site to be from the whole site, but we're not going to go over that again, of course. But it was really interesting to see the detail come through, and I actually really like all of the buildings that I've seen. I think it has followed through on some of the things we were told about the concerns we had at the beginning. So subject to any other comments, I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll park that for the moment. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, 9.125, you talk about 75% affordable rent. Who's the landlords going to be of that affordable rent? And what does affordable rent mean in terms of comparison to market rent?
Affordable rent would be 80% of market rent, and the intention is that the affordable housing units will be transferred to a registered provider, and details of that would be submitted in the Section 106 agreement.
So housing association?
Yes.
Yeah. And what is intermediate housing?
So those are the shared ownership properties, essentially. It's reduced rent, half is owned, or a certain percentage is owned by the housing association, and the resident owns, again, a certain percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My question concerns the Gypsy and Traveller site. Who actually will own the land that the pitches are going to be put on, and who's going to be responsible for the management of that site?
So under the Section 106 agreement, more details have to be submitted of the specifications of the Traveller site prior to 150 dwellings being occupied. So phase 1, which is the shaded area, grey-scaled area, that's 350 dwellings. So prior to occupation 150, we'll get more details of that. And then prior to 350 dwellings being occupied, they have to submit a management and maintenance plan. So we don't have that detail yet. The Section 106 agreement does refer to a registered provider or other management body. I have contacted the agent today, and they've said they haven't approached anyone of yet, but that will have to be controlled. They won't be able to occupy more than 350 units without going through that process.
I have a supplementary. It's along the same theme. It is of concern that there doesn't seem to be any real thought as yet to the issues that I've raised, and yet if the site is not managed correctly, then that is of no benefit to the Gypsy and Traveller community itself, and might cause possible problems with the associated community. It's more of a comment really than a question, but it is a concern to me.
Councillor Ron.
Yeah, so there's not that many dwellings in this particular application, but quite a lot of open, public open space and areas of equipped areas of play. I'm wondering how the stewardship of those areas works, and will they be adopted by the local authority, or what area will be funding that from subscription, from service charges?
So under the Section 106 agreement, prior to commencement of any sort of phase, they have to submit a management and maintenance plan for all these sort of open areas. And then it does sort of refer to sort of the transfer to decorum or another management body, and then it controls service charges as well and the costs associated with that. So again, that's detail which is controlled by the Section 106 agreement, essentially.
So will that be in another reserved matters application? Or?
It's submitted in a sort of, it will be submitted in the form of an application to discharge the obligations of the Section 106 agreement, so we will get that detail, we'll have to review it, and we'll engage with the agent at that stage, and we'll consult sort of expertise on that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Right, so we've got a recommendation from Councillor Hobson recommending to approve. Do you have a proposal? That's a proposer. Do you have a seconder, please? I think Councillor Bristow got there just before you. Right. Proposed and seconded. Can I have a show of hands? Those in favour, please. 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8 in favour. Those against? Abstentions? 2 and 1 not voting. Right. Now 5D has been removed from the agenda because we don't need, it's going to be under delegated approval. 5E is 01264, 35 Bellswains Lane, construction of 4-bedroom chalet bungalow. Now, this is going to be unusual in the sense that we're going to have a presentation, right? Rosemary Chapman's going to do the presentation, and then we've got some speakers. At least we've got some comments from absent speakers, plus another speaker. Lois, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. This application is for 35 Bellswains Lane, construction of a 4-bedroom chalet bungalow with cycle provision and parking. Next slide, please. So this is just the site location plan. It should be noted that this site previously had a scheme which was refused for 2 dwellings within that space, and that was refused on character design and residential amenity. Next slide. So these are the proposed floor plans. These are the proposed elevations. And then this is how the development will sit within the plot. So it is backland tandem development, but the precedent's already been set within the area. Here is just a section plan showing the visibility from Bellswains Lane. And here you can also see dotted on are the 2 previously refused dwellings. One of the main concerns in terms of the previous scheme was that they would sit above number 35. And now that's kind of been brought down and it sits quite nicely behind the existing garage and the existing dwelling there. And then moving on to the site photos. So this is the site photos of the dwelling and then the driveway that the new dwelling would use. And then this is the site. So in the corner, you can see 49B New Well, and the other corner, that's 55 and 57. And then this is facing towards 57 New Well. And then this is the previously refused scheme. The elevations for the previously refused scheme. And then here's just a plan highlighting some previous backland development and recent approvals in terms of Bellswains and Belmont and New Well. Thank you.
Yep. So I'm reading the statement from Councillors Hemel and Greenfield in objection. They were unable to attend this meeting and have asked for their statement to be read out. So I guess the normal time limit would apply. As the ward councillors for Bennett's End and on behalf of our residents, we would like to express our continuing opposition to this application. We've been working with the residents affected by this application since March 2024 and have called in this proposed overdevelopment multiple times. These call-ins have resulted in the plans being amended, but the residents still believe that this plan will materially impact their properties and the quality of their lives. In addition, the length of this process has put a strain on them, and approving it will have a further detrimental impact on their mental health and well-being. Before we get to our specific objections, we would like to comment on actions taken by the developer in relation to the biodiversity of the site. We note the comment on biodiversity net gain post-determination, which stated that a net loss has been shown. We understand the further comment that it would be inappropriate for concerns about the loss of biodiversity to be used as a reason to refuse an application. However, we would like to draw the committee's attention to the loss of biodiversity which occurred before any plans were submitted. This property was a 3 to 4 bedroom home with a large garden which contained a beautiful old apple orchard. This orchard was a haven for wildlife, including birds, foxes, badgers, hedgehogs, and field mice. It brought pleasure to the former owner and her neighbours. As a direct result of this orchard, the neighbouring gardens were also full of wildlife and birds, including woodpeckers. In December 2023, this apple orchard was ripped out using heavy machinery and the home of the wildlife destroyed. Note, the neighbours believe that there was a preservation order on the orchard, but cannot confirm that. Moving to the specific objections we have been raising since the first plans were submitted and remain with the revised proposal. Overdevelopment. Our residents believe, even having reduced the number and size of proposed dwellings on the site, that this application still represents an overdevelopment of the existing site. They are also concerned that it could set a precedent for the neighbourhood, which could encourage further applications, making the area even more overdeveloped. The proposed bungalow at the rear of the site is in close proximity to the fence and garden of 37 Bellswains Lane, with a potential loss of privacy and detrimental impact on the garden. Access and road safety. The driveway to the existing property will be extended to facilitate access to the proposed property. The proposal has designated parking for 6 cars, but uses the same footprint as the original proposal, which included parking for 10 cars. The area formerly used for 2 of the spaces is shown as lawn on the revised plan, but could be used for parking. Note, the current proposal only shows 1 car space for 35 Bellswains Lane, which we do not believe is realistic. Bellswains Lane is a busy road and bus route running to the east of the Grand Union Canal. This driveway is on a hill with the brow just yards to the south, and increased traffic getting into and out of it will place road users and pedestrians in danger. Air and noise pollution. The use of a minimum of 6 cars, plus visitors exiting and entering the driveway, will result in significant noise and disturbance for the neighbours. These additional vehicles are likely to increase the vehicle emissions in the area, leading to a reduction in air quality and exposing neighbours to more pollution. Vehicle emissions, usually highest on start-up, are likely to increase significantly with proposed parking for a minimum of 6 plus visitors. Environmental impact of work already done. Neighbours have reported waste and ground pipe work were laid and covered over when the orchard was ripped out. They are concerned that this does not appear to have been inspected to confirm it meets appropriate standards. Residents are worried that inferior quality pipe work could lead to an increase in rodents and other pollution, which will impact their properties. In conclusion, we believe that this revised application still represents an overdevelopment of a residential site with consequential negative impacts on the environment and biodiversity of the immediately surrounding area. It is likely to present an increased hazard to pedestrians and road traffic due to the increased number of vehicles entering and leaving the site. This is in addition to the likely impact on air quality due to higher emissions and increased noise pollution. As we have already stated, this will have a knock-on effect on the mental health and well-being of the residents, and we urge the committee to reject this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just interject? I meant to say something, but didn't make it onto the agenda, just for members to be aware that there are 2 new conditions to be added on, one for BNG, for details to be submitted, and also removing Class A PD.
Thank you. Right.
Sorry, could you just repeat that last?
Sorry, yeah. So Class A, so any extensions will be removed to keep the amenity space of that rear garden.
Now we've got a speaker in support of this, Mr. Coward.
Good evening, yes. I've got both lights on.
Right, you've got 3 minutes, sir.
I'm the applicant's agent. The principle of a new house in a suitable location is accepted and the tilted balance applies. As you've heard, the scheme is a much reduced version from that which was refused at appeal. As you've seen, the plans over 2 detached 2-storey houses, and we're now down to 1 chalet bungalow. The officer's report sets out a very detailed assessment of how the scheme meets all the relevant tests in terms of distance to neighbours and impacts, and effectively goes around the compass addressing all of the properties. We've submitted an overshadowing diagram, which is one of the application documents, and that really does show the very limited impact. The proposed site plan that you've seen shows the space around the chalet bungalow and also how this compares with the local context. That itself is quite mixed. There's chalet bungalows, there's 2-storey development, and there's even a flatted scheme at the back. We've got the 2 car parking spaces. That's a slight under provision, but it's a sustainable location. We submitted the BNG assessment. The apple orchard was not protected, and the BNG metric does go back to 2020. That's how these things were all assessed. The new home will contribute towards the housing figures, and it's a new house in a sustainable location. I'm just going to briefly respond to the comments from the councillors on behalf of the local objector. Overdevelopment, well, it is just the one unit. A strain, it's going to be developed quickly and then sold on. Precedent, well, it's quite a unique site. It's a classic planning maxim, each on its merits. Highways and access, no objection from the Highway Authority. Air and noise pollution, well, it's one home in the urban area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, members, over to you. Councillor Williams.
Okay, I'm happy to give way to Councillor Williams if. No, okay, fine. Okay, fine, thank you. So I've just got one question on this and then a comment. So the question is, can you just confirm how much parking number 35 has? Because it's not clear from the, I can't, because the writing's too small. What parking there is on site, because on this, the Belsains Road is not, you can't park on the road. So just trying to work out what happens to number 35's parking when this new development's done, please. How many spaces for 35? How many for 35A or whatever that's going to be? New development, please.
So for number 35, there's 2 spaces.
Okay.
There is the garage, but that doesn't meet the standard space requirements.
There's the garage behind where those 2 cars
Yeah,
are
so
parked,
the garage
right?
is split into 2.
And where is the parking for, are they the dotted lines behind
Yeah,
the
so
garage?
the outlined dotted line
Okay.
there. We did actually have more parking, just kind of in front of that as well, but there was quite a substantial amount of hard standing. But in the future, and if members felt needed, we could ask for a parking plan.
Okay, but there is parking there. Thank you. That's just because I just couldn't read it because it's too small even on the PDF. And then the other one is a comment really. This isn't a material planning thing, but I always look at Google Maps when to film it if I'm not familiar with the location. And all of the trees that were there in 2022 are just a comment that anyone that can take down the trees like that, it doesn't affect whether or not I'm going to give planning permission to this because it's not relevant, as we say, and they're not protected trees. But I just think it happened in my own patch as well, in Green End Gardens, and I just think it's I just don't understand how people can get rid of all those trees when we need them for climate change control, particularly on that busy and fleeting road. But there you go. I just felt I needed to say that. Thank you, Chair. I did ask a question about parking. Just before that. Yes. No, just one question and one comment.
Yeah, I can echo what Councillor Hobson has just said about the trees. I find that quite shocking, and the fact that it indicates that they were preempting getting permission. I find that questionable, to say the least. I'd like to understand further about the privacy concerns, please. Thank you.
So yeah, this was a concern that I did raise in regards to the first floor window. That there's a condition on there for that first floor window to be obscurely glazed, because obviously I had some concerns with number 35's rear garden and also number 37. So that's been conditioned to be obscurely glazed, just to make sure we don't get any harmful views. Yeah. And then.
Yes, thank you. Owing to the shortfall of parking, are we happy to put a parking plan in place? Because it is a concern that this was meant to have 3 spaces, but it's only going to have 2. Can we insert that?
Yeah, is it reasonable, Phil?
Yeah. I mean, there's always a balance to be struck. Obviously, the provision of additional parking space will have an impact in terms of additional hard standing and the loss of soft landscape and garden areas. But if members do have concern in relation to parking, members also need to consider that if parking becomes a reason for refusal, then can that reason for refusal be mitigated by way of a condition? And in this case, it would be possible to add a condition seeking the details of a 3rd parking space.
Thank you, Phil. Actually, following on from that, and you mentioned soft landscaping and so on, if I'm not mistaken, the trees were removed in 2023 and the assessment period for biodiversity goes back to 2020. Is it that the biodiversity gain rules do not apply owing to the size and scale of the development, it just being one house. Because otherwise I would be very unconvinced that with the trees being removed, there would be any gain in that area.
So B&G credits are being secured off-site, and we also do have a soft landscaping plan to come in to be reviewed in that regard.
Okay, I see. In that case, I would ask that the parking plan be inserted as a condition.
If I heard it right, there was the ward councillors raised something about 6 parking spaces, potentially 10. Did I hear that right? I'm not sure I quite understand what their parking point is in relation to the plans that have been presented.
I think their point about 10 was in regards to the previous application. And I think also their comments might relate to the previous scheme in terms of where we didn't have the parking to the front and we had the extra like hard standing, so we've obviously reduced that. But there are only 3, I don't think.
If I can make an observation, there seems to be an awful lot of hard standing for the number of parking spaces that are specified. So I'm sure that drivers could be creative in squeezing more cars in.
That's where we're at. Sorry.
Thank you. Just, is the application site the whole of the site, including the existing dwelling, or is there a demarcation between the application site and the existing site? Bearing in mind I'm colourblind, so there might be a line on there I can't see.
So the site to the rear is the application site. That's the line in red. Yeah.
Okay. So all of the
red.
All of the land to the rear of the existing property is virtually into the application site.
Yeah.
And clearly, looking at the plan there, you could park 2 cars in front of the property, in front of the existing parking spaces. I mean, I don't think it's enough to refuse, but I'm glad I'm not living next door to it. And it's certainly a very large property on a very small plot. So not a good planning application, but I suspect there's not strong enough grounds for refusal, but not good planning, not good at all, I don't think.
I just wanted to pick up on the comment about in the statement about the pipe work. I don't understand whether we need to look at that or consider it in any way.
That wouldn't be a material planning consideration.
Sorry, would like to just clarify that. It will be or it won't be? It won't be. Right, thank you.
Yeah, just picking up on Councillor Williams' line of thought. The ward councillors flagged it up as, in their opinion, overdevelopment. What do you say as a planning officer on that in relation to the surrounding buildings and whether this building is overly large and does constitute overdevelopment?
I agree that it is a bulky dwelling, and I have kind of gone through that in my report and my assessment. The ones that you can't see, which are just out of this plan here, number 49B and 49A, are quite substantially large in themselves and are quite bulky dwellings. There is enough garden space, it meets policy requirements. So whilst I agree it is quite a large and bulky dwelling, it's difficult to find a ground of refusal.
Right. Any further comments? Right. In which case, do you have a proposer for officer's recommendation?
We just need to clarify with members whether there is a preference to have whether they're voting on this application with the additional condition, which would be, notwithstanding details shown on the approved plans, the dwelling hereby permitted shall not be occupied until a plan has been submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority showing the provision of a 3rd parking space. The approved parking plan shall thereafter be implemented and the parking spaces shown maintained. So I just need clarification on whether that additional condition is being included in the vote.
Are we content to have that included?
Agreed.
Okay, good. Right, in which case, a proposer for the officer's recommendation, Councillor Durrant. Seconder, please. Councillor Bristow. Can I have a show of hands, those in favour of officer's recommendation with this condition? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 in favour. Those against? 1. Abstentions? 2, 3, 4. So officer's recommendation is carried. Thank you very much. It's 9 o'clock. We would normally have a break at 9 o'clock. Agreed? 10 minutes? 5 minutes. Okay, a 5-minute break. Come back at 9:05. All right. Right. The next two items, 5F and 5G, I shall be stepping down from the committee because I'll be speaking in against on 5F, representing Birkenhead Town Council, and on 5G, the barn at Nettleton Road, I know the applicant. So in interest of transparency, Councillor Williams is standing in for me.
Okay. Moving on then to 5G on the agenda, which I no, not 5G. 5F on the agenda, conversion and alteration of part of existing horticultural storage barn to create associated residential dwelling. Over to Gib.
Yeah, this is me again. So this is Hedgerow Place, Beggars Lane and Berkhamsted. Conversion and alteration of part existing horticultural storage barn to create associated residential dwelling. So here's the site location plan, showing the context of the site. Just a wider kind of satellite image as well. So this is the existing barn. The elevations are current. This is the existing floor plan. So there's already a mezzanine floor in there. These are the proposed floor plans. So it's going to be a 3-bedroom dwelling and then kind of split with storage onto the side. There's going to be a modest dormer, cat-slide dormer introduced and associated fenestration, so some windows and doors. Here are some site photos. So there's quite a nice thick boundary around the site consisting of hedging. And as you can see, there's already some existing windows. And there's already quite a nice amount of hard standing, so there's going to be no more on the site to accommodate parking. That will just be used for parking. And here is the site location plan again. So it is in Greenbelt and AONB. It meets the criteria of 154H IV of reusing a building of substantial construction. And in terms of AONB, whilst there will be some additional fenestration, the building's quite nicely set down. In terms of long distance views from Bullbeggars Lane, it's kind of nicely set within itself. There's a nice already existing hedgerow as well, so very limited views. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two speakers on this particular application. So speaking in objection and going first will be Ward Councillor Garrick Stevens. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I am representing Birkenhead Town Council's objection and request members to carefully weigh the arguments put forward in the report. However it is viewed, it comes down to creeping development in the Greenbelt and should be refused without solid evidence that it supports a sustainable business. There's some history to this. Go back to 2006. It had a retention of 2 containers and it's gradually grown. Back in the day when there was the first incursion onto the land purporting to establish a horticultural business, that was followed by the 2 containers. And it was all too predictable that at some point we would see an application for accommodation on the site, the thin end of the wedge. And so it has come to pass. And of course, the existing barn conveniently has sufficient excess space for living accommodation that includes 3 bedrooms. We are familiar once again with the report's elaborate justification to show how the modest changes comply with the NPPF and other policies. And in the absence of the 5-year land supply, we should grant consent for the property. In the past, even a more substantial conversion would be refused without sound evidence for its justification. And it's arguable whether the tilted balance should guide the recommendation. Now, I'm conscious that members may consider this to be a relatively minor issue. However, as an incursion into the Greenbelt, it is anything but. Our objection included reference to paragraph 154 of the NPF, which the report covers extensively in paragraph 9 onwards, under principle of development. But paragraph 154 also says, development in the Greenbelt is inappropriate unless one of the following exceptions applies. And little a, which is not included in the report, little a says buildings for agriculture and forestry. We are told this application is to support a horticultural activity, which is a specialized branch of agriculture. If members are minded to approve officer's recommendation, given that this is for a horticultural activity, it would be reasonable to include an additional condition to tie the site to horticulture or agricultural activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I'll just wait for the timer to be reset and then I've got Mr. Trevor Page speaking in support of the application. Okay, you've got 3 minutes and start when you're ready.
Hi.
Could you just press, oh, you got the microphone?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hello, yes, I'm Trevor Page, the applicant in this application. Sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's okay, no problem. Yes, so hi, I'm Trevor Page, the applicant in this application, and owner and director of Hedgerow Services Limited, a horticultural business employing and operating in the Corm area for the last 28 years. I've owned the site for the last 20 years, looking to sensitively convert for living glasses help. I've owned the site for the last 20 years and looking to sensitively convert for living parts of the existing barn to help with the site security and running operation to keep the business sustainable going forwards. I would therefore ask the committee gratefully to support the summary of the case officer for the approval of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Very brief. Thank you. Right, over to the committee. Questions, comments, thoughts? Councillor Hobson.
Hello, it's always me. Just to, this doesn't actually, this is just for interest really. So the people that will be living in this house, are they employees then, or is it just, it's just because you'll have somebody living there, it'll be more secure? That's, you can't, unfortunately you can't answer, but you're nodding, so that's fine, or shaking your head. But that was just out of interest, it's not material. And the only other thing I would say in terms of encroachment, as far as I understand my reading of the report, is the barn was there in 2007. So that's what, 18 years ago. I think sometimes when we see applications here for barns from scratch in the green belt and NNB, and we have some concerns about whether it's creeping, and one might expect that to happen quite soon. So that's just really an observation for me in terms of my analysis of this, even though to a certain extent creeping development isn't a material planning permission, neither is precedent setting to a certain degree. So thank you for allowing me to just make those comments.
Thank you. Any other members wishing to comment, observations? Okay, I'll move to the recommendation. Is there anybody who support or, oh sorry, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a material planning consideration, but is there any track record of the security of the site being compromised at all, that requiring a full-time resident to be on site for the safety of the business?
Yes, so within the planning statement, they do give quite a good amount of detail into there has been attempted theft on the site.
Councillor Mitchell.
And would it be possible to have a condition for the hedgerow not to be removed? As you mentioned, it gives very good screening.
So there is a soft landscaping plan to be submitted, so that would include the enclosures as well.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other notifications. Moving to the recommendation, is there anybody prepared to second propose a nomination and seconded?
I was going to suggest, could we propose it on the basis of Councillor Stevens's suggested condition?
Okay, I'll just seek officer's guidance on the suggestion that with the condition which ties it to horticultural and agricultural use. Do you have any observation on that?
So, I mean, it is possible if members are of the view that the only reason that members are supporting this application is for that security reason, then, so if the applicant has successfully demonstrated an exceptional need, then it would be possible to limit the accommodation for that horticultural purposes. I think the difficulty that officers have is that in terms of this isn't a new dwelling. Typically, you would apply an agricultural tie, and you would say, well, the only reason we're allowing a new agricultural building in a location where this building would normally be permitted is for agricultural purposes, and therefore that you've got that exceptional need test, and then therefore we would seek to retain that agricultural exceptional need. Obviously here we're in a slightly different situation in that we've got an existing barn, and I guess the question is, if it was for someone solely connected with horticultural, or if it was someone not connected with horticultural, what would be the external difference? So it is quite a tricky one. So it is possible to add it. And I would also add that the application description does say, I've got the description, conversion and alteration of part of existing horticultural storage barn to create associated residential dwelling. So again, that could be taken as that in order to comply with that permission, it automatically has to be associated, because associated is written into the description of the application. So again, officers are not convinced of the necessity to further kind of a bolts and braces approach, but it is a condition that is possible for members to add.
So if I may, Chair, just following up on that, just so that we fully understand what the situation is. So what you're saying is that the association, if broken in the future, the horticultural business ceases to operate, you're saying it would be difficult to take away the residential planning basis for the property.
I think as it stands, because of the description, to create associated residential dwelling, then this would be a planning permission for the occupation linked to the horticultural business, and therefore a further application would be required to kind of amend that. But in reality, would it be difficult to refuse an application on which particular person is occupying that if there is no external differences? That may be tricky.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands. I think Councillor Darren indicated he was happy to propose the officer's recommendation. Do we have a seconder?
And this is without that condition, Chair?
Yes.
Yes, I second it.
Okay. We have a proposer and a seconder for the grant of permission. All those in favour, please show. 6, 7, 8. Those against? Abstentions? 2. That's granted by 8 votes to 0 and 2 abstentions. Thank you. Good. Moving on then to 5G, increase. Oops, let me just put my glasses back on. Increase in ridge height, insertion of dormer windows, alteration to openings, new landscaping, and change of use to a Class C3 dwelling, the barn at Nettleton Road, Friston. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So the application site is located on the south side of Nettleton Road in Friston. If you go to the first slide, please. So you can see the application site outlined in red, and outlined in blue is also within the same ownership. So the application has been referred to committee due to the contrary view of the parish council. So the site comprises a building used as stables. It's located within the Greenbelt and the St.Johns National Landscape. Other constraints, there's an Article 4 direction removing agricultural PD rights. The surrounding area, as you can see, is rural in character with limited built development. Next slide. So this is showing the existing access off Nettleton Road. So that would be used for the proposed converted dwelling. Next. So this is showing the east side of the existing building. So that's the gable end, the east gable end of the existing building. And this is the south elevation of the existing building. So that's facing the open countryside. And then this is looking east back towards the access. And next slide. So this is a view from public footpath number 5, which is to the south of the site. So we're looking north, and you can just make out the roof of the existing building, the corrugated metal roof there. So the proposal is for conversion of the existing building and to increase the ridge height by 0.65 metres. There would be the insertion of a dormer window, additional openings, including glazing on the south elevation. It would be converted to a 1-bedroom dwelling. It includes associated parking and landscaping. The existing access from Nettleton Road would be used. Next slide. So the entrance would be on the left-hand side on the west of the building, and then you can see on the bottom, the southern elevation would be where the glazing is, and on the ground floor, that would be all of the living accommodation. And then this is, so internally, there would be a mezzanine floor, and this is where the sleeping accommodation would be. So it would be within the roof space. And onto the elevation. So this is the south elevation facing the countryside. That's where the glazing and the dormer window are. And the west elevation showing the main entrance. And the north elevation at the top, so that's facing onto Nettleton Road. And between that and the road, there's a 3-metre high bank, and then very dense, mature hedging and trees. So the benefits are considered to be the reuse of a vacant building, providing high quality accommodation, and the remediation of some contaminated land. In terms of the Greenbelt, the conversion or the reuse of the building, the extension, the upward extension, and the redevelopment of previously developed land to convert it to residential that would not have a substantial impact on greenbelt openness is considered to be appropriate development within the greenbelt. And in terms of the Chilterns National Landscape, there would be some limited harm in terms of visual impacts, so it would have a more domestic appearance compared to the existing building. But on balance, it's felt that the benefits outweigh that limited level of harm. So it's recommended that the application be delegated with a view to approval, subject to a deed of variation and the conditions outlined in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I have three speakers indicated on this application. So first of all, I'll ask Councillor Eamon Brennan. Speaking in objection, you have 3 minutes. Good evening.
Turn one. Okay, I'm Councillor Brennan, representing the Nettleton and Potton End Parish Council. I'm reading this objection. It should be noted the Parish Council supported the previous application for this redevelopment and continues to have no concerns about the change of use. But the proposed design has changed quite significantly from that previously submitted under 22-02107 FUL. And the Parish Council is persuaded the arguments advanced by the Nettleton and Tristan Society that is no longer appropriate. I'll go into more detail now. The tight planning restrictions that exist to control the external visual appearance of barn conversions must be applied to the design of conversions of agricultural buildings in this highly protected and vulnerable area of the Greenbelt and Chilterns Natural Landscape, and within the setting of the Grade 2 Ashridge Park and Gardens to ensure the integrity is not lost in the landscape. What this means is that the barn should still maintain its current exterior visual appearance after conversion. Installing oversized fenestration has widely been recognised as being unacceptable, and the introduction of brick elevations are also a radical change to be resisted where possible. While each application must be looked on the merits, it cannot be completely in isolation of what has been approved and refused in immediate vicinity. There are a number of structures locally within 500 metres of this site which are capable of being subject to future applications to convert to residential use, and allowing this agricultural building to raise the roof to put in a second storey, it could be an inflection point and cause harm to the landscape. Therefore, there are consequences for allowing this precedent to take place. And the committee, I'm sure, are aware of the Section 73 procedure recently used in this immediate vicinity to change a large house at Friston Vineyard. And there's a new Section 73 being made to enlarge that house even further. We're very concerned that a second story of this application, if granted, then the Section 73 could then be utilised to make further alterations to the roof, provide even more second story accommodation and significantly enlarge the overall accommodation. It's wrong to say the mezzanine level will not be perceived visually. It is clear from the footpath 005 to the south that with the dormer and fenestration in the roof, it's a two-story dwelling. So the application needs to be refused on the basis of the negative visual impact on the Greenbelt, harm to the Chilterns National Landscape and harm to the setting of the Grade 2 Registered Park and Gardens, contrary to paragraph 182 of the NPPF and Core Strategy CS24. Thank you.
Just reset the timer and I'll ask Alison McDougall, also speaking in objection.
Good evening, Chair and Councillors. I speak on behalf of the Nettleton and Friston Society, which is objecting to the application. The Society does not agree with the Planning Officer's recommendations that this design will not cause substantial harm to the Greenbelt and Chilterns Natural Landscape. It definitely would if it were to be built. There are 4 reasons we say this. 1, the proposed installation of a mezzanine level, significant roof alterations which increase the height, and the installation of large windows changes the agricultural appearance of the building to become a highly visible domestic property when viewed from the Nettleton with Potton End public footpath number 5 to the south. 2, the southern elevation is now proposed to be over 50% glass with windows in the raised roof, which will have a substantial light box effect. This is completely contrary to the Chilterns Design Guide Policy DP8, which states that architectural designs that spill light out of large areas of glazing should be avoided. The planning officer has acknowledged the concerns about light spill, but thinks it can be controlled by condition. We disagree. There is not even a condition proposing requiring automatic closing blinds to both ground and first floor glazing at dusk, and there is precedent for such a condition being imposed in this area. 3, the view of this building and its roof from the public footpath number 5 is seen directly against the backdrop of the Grade 2 star listed Ashridge Registered Park and Gardens, an important heritage asset. The detrimental impact of this proposal on the setting of the Grade 2 star Registered Park and Gardens has not been considered by the planning officer in their report and will have a significant negative visual impact. 4, the officer's report acknowledges that the increase in ridge height, dormer window, increased glazing, particularly on the southern elevation, the light spill, the parking, and defined residential curtilage will have a greater detrimental visual impact on the Greenbelt and the Chilterns National Landscape than the existing building, but does not consider the cumulative impact substantial. We must disagree, particularly as the proposal's impact on the setting of the Registered Park and Gardens has not been taken into account or given any weight in the officer's recommendation. In order for this project to fit into the Greenbelt and Chilterns National Landscape successfully, the Society feels that it needs to be better considered, more subtle, and retain the single storey and small windows of the current structure so as not to cause the substantial harm that this proposal entails. We urge you to refuse this application on the basis that it is contrary to policies CS5 and CS24, and there's been no weight or consideration attached to its impact on the setting of the Grade 2 star listed Ashridge Park and Gardens. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Matthew Cannon speaking in support of the application. You've got 3 minutes, Mr. Cannon.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair and Committee. This application for Badgers Wood is about sensitively adapting a modest existing barn that already has a planning consent for a residential dwelling. What we are presenting today is not a new dwelling, but a more careful, sustainable and sensitive architectural evolution of that approval. My parents have lived and worked locally for over 25 years, having owned the property for nearly 20 years. Their ambition has never been speculative, but simply to remain part of this community and landscape in their later years. Importantly, they are going above and beyond the existing planning permission to keep the building's originality. Instead of black timber overcladding, as per the existing permission, they are preserving the original flattened brick walls, maintaining the barn's honest materiality and form. The corrugated roof is reinstated at the same pitch and angle, with overhangs orientated to limit both light spill to the south and, in the interest of sustainability, reduce solar gain and the risk of overheating. This is not a suburban reinterpretation, but a faithful continuation of the barn's agricultural DNA. The ridge height increase is 65 centimetres to allow a small mezzanine. Glazing is confined to the south elevation, set within the rhythm of existing brick piers. There is no scattering of domestic openings, and conditions can ensure dark skies are protected in full compliance with the Chilterns Design Guide. Before I close, I'd like to highlight a few key factual points that show the limited impact and neighbourly nature of the proposal. The barn's footprint remains exactly the same as the existing buildings and the same as the already approved scheme. The existing building occupies less than 1% of the total site area. Site access has been described as unchanged. Importantly, Folly's Farm next door, the only neighbour with a material view of the barn, has written in full support of the scheme. The next nearest neighbour is over 150 metres away and separated by Nettleton Road, large hedgerows and mature trees. From the road to the north, the building is hardly visible, even in winter, and if it could be seen, you'd find the original brick walls as they stand now, and a corrugated roof as per the existing building. This is not a precedent for wider change, but a one-off, small-scale, sustainable reuse of an existing structure, with an existing residential planning permission. It aligns with the local plan policy CS5 and CS24, delivering a low-energy, environmentally responsible home that protects and enhances the national landscape. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. If I could ask both, Ms. McDougall, if you could just turn your microphone off, please. Thank you. Right, over to the committee. If there are any questions, officers, on what you've heard or more broader comments on the application. Nobody got any questions? Councillor Hobson.
Hi, thank you. I paused a little just in case somebody wanted to make it not me the first person to speak again. I just had a question about, is it possible to put that condition in about the light? Because the proposal is so much more different, as pretty as it is, it's so much more different to the one that was approved. And I was concerned about light pollution from all of those windows. So is there, was mention of automatic blinds at dusk, is that something that we can ask to be put in? Because I think that is a responsible thing to do if we were to keep it. I take on board the point about the brick being the same. The roof, however, quite clearly is very different, and whether that can be seen from different places is, I'm just trying to work that out myself. But certainly, anyway, my question is, can we put a condition in that would make sure that if this was to be approved, that the light from those windows at dusk would not be spilling out and affecting the wildlife and disrupting the Chilterns and the natural environment. Thank you.
Yeah, so there is a condition requiring the submission of glazing details. So there are glazing products out there that reduce light spill. But if you wanted an additional condition for automatic closing blinds, is that what you're saying?
I'm just trying to work out, I'd not heard of that before, and it drew my attention to because I don't live in the country, so I don't really think about light pollution, but it drew it to my attention. I hadn't picked it up from reading the report, but I don't know how practical that is or how proportionate that is really. So it was just I guess if the answer is, if the committee wanted it, you could put that condition in, and then I guess it's up to the committee to decide whether that is proportionate or not. So is it a practical and proportionate condition, or would it be overkill? That's kind of what I'm saying.
Do you think so, Phil? Ground floor level?
I'm not aware of the examples that the speaker referred to. There must be hundreds of homes in the Chilterns A and B without a restriction, where they have to have a auto blind at dusk. I'm not sure in terms of the particular sensitivities of this site that would warrant an exceptional approach. I would have to rely on the case officer in terms of how prominent it is from long distance views, how that light would, it'd have to be an exceptionally sensitive location, I would suggest, to impose such a restrictive condition.
Thank you. And already the officer said that there is a fenestration condition that would need to be met in discussion with before building could go ahead. I guess that's what she said.
Yep, so there's already a condition requiring the submission of glazing details. So there are glazing products apparently that kind of reduce the amount of light spill, although they clearly wouldn't completely emit it. But if you did want a blind condition, I would suggest that it should only be for the dormer window and not for the ground floor windows.
Councillor Allen.
Are there any conservation area or associated with Ashridge, listing design requirements that a conversion of this kind should comply with, that this proposed development breaches? I.e., is there any design code that suggests that it should stay as the original application, as being more sympathetic to a rural agricultural environment than this, which is rather more modern?
There's the Chilterns design guide, which does encourage the use of traditional materials and design, but there isn't anything in terms of the Ashridge that I'm aware of in terms of the Ashridge estate. So
whilst accepting that there's, the retention of the brick, I can't see where the flint came in. I thought I heard mention of flint. Accepting that half of the building does retain the original brick stroke flint, the dormer and the large glass windows would suggest to be very at variance with a traditional design in a rural Chilterns protected area. Is that not the case?
Yep, it is modern. It is a modern contemporary design. So it's just kind of weighing that up in the planning balance, whether you think that is so harmful that it warrants refusal on those grounds.
So the challenge we have as a committee is to assess whether the balance between the individual's rights for architectural self-expression, if you like, and the community's right to expect a building to maintain within a standard or within a keeping for a rural agricultural setting.
Yeah, and we have to bear in mind as well that there is a fallback position, so there is an extant permission to convert it into a dwelling, and that permission does have additional windows on all elevations. They're not as substantial as these ones, but on the southern elevation, I believe there are about 5 openings, including patio windows. So that's another thing to bear in mind, that there is an extant permission there that has more glazing than there is on the existing building, which is none at the moment.
And what is there any proportion on how much more glass there is in this structure compared to the currently approved structure?
I don't have any figures before me, but for this current proposal, because there's no glazing at all on the northern elevation on the rear, in comparison to the extant scheme where there is glazing on the rear elevation, on the sides and on the front. I don't have the figures before me, but I wouldn't say that it's very substantially more, if that makes sense.
And the dormer window would seem to be very at odds with the sort of buildings that you see around the Chiltern Beechwoods area. Is that something that we have within our powers to take exception to?
I mean, I think you would see dormer windows in the Chilterns, but they would probably be more of a traditional design than this one. This is quite contemporary.
Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
I'm just trying to understand about the visibility of the building. We mentioned footpath 5, I think. Can we just have a look at that again? And then also, is there a street? Can you see it from the street?
So you can't see it from the street. I do have so this is the view from footpath 5. So this is looking towards the north. So you can see the roof of the building there. I think that is maybe the only place that I could readily see the building from along that footpath. And then in terms of the road, if you go back, Heather, to the access, there's a photo of the access. I think it's the first photo at the beginning. Yeah, so the building is behind, there's a 3-meter high bank, and on top of that, there's very substantial mature trees and hedges, so you can't see it from the road. And on that northern elevation, no fenestration or glazing is proposed.
And do we have the previous plan at all?
It's not in this presentation.
Okay.
I can describe it to you.
Yeah.
Can I check? Can I have an exceptional 2-minute discussion with the case officer? There is one point raised by one of the speakers is that the planning report hasn't made reference to the setting of the listed park. So there is a statutory duty in this regard. So can I have an exceptional 2-minute pause with the case officer before the debate continues?
Okay, we're back. As was indicated, there is, as was indicated by one of the objections, there is a requirement for the council to consider any potential effects on registered gardens, and I'll ask Mr. Stanley to read out the relevant paragraph, but in light of that, the recommendation will be that enable that consideration to be incorporated in the report. This item will be deferred to a future meeting of the committee. But Mr. Stanley, do you want to?
Yeah, so there was a new provision in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023 that requires local planning authorities to have special regard to the desirability of preserving or enhancing a park or garden or its setting when they are considering granting planning permission. We needed to double check the location of Ashridge Park and Garden in relation to this site, and we understand it's literally on the other side of the road, and therefore, the officer view is that duty to have regard hasn't taken place yet in the officer's report. It does say that there is that duty for applications that may affect it, but the officer's report at this stage hasn't considered whether it does affect it or not, and therefore, and if it does affect it, then there's a need to consult also with Historic England and the Gardens Trust. So there are other steps. So yes, it's in the officer's view that these need to be undertaken, and a deferral is therefore required. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that item is deferred. So apologies for that. Are you coming back, Councillor Stevens? Do you want to? I'm quite happy for you to come back.
Dear me. Right. Right, Heather? Right. Moving on, this is 5H. Retention of outdoor storage racking for SIG roofing at 9 to 10 Sunderland Estate, Church Lane, Kings Langley. Heather Evie is the case officer. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the site comprises units 9 and 10, occupied by SIG Roofing, set within the Sunderland Yard Industrial Estate off Church Lane in Kings Langley. SIG Roofing are a building materials business, and they're served by a front and rear yard. You can see on the plan of the western site boundary, or the red line on the left-hand side, adjoins residential properties along Alexandra Road. Permission is sought for the retention of 2 sets of steel storage racking, and the application is at committee due to the contrary view of the Parish Council. They've raised concerns relating to the proposal's impact on the residential amenity of neighbouring properties along Alexandra Road in terms of loss of light, privacy, noise, design and appearance. So this just shows the original site plan, so you can see the layout and the context with the residential properties at the top of the plan and the wider industrial estate, commercial buildings shown at the bottom. This is the current site plan. So the storage racking, there's 3 metre high storage racking set along that western boundary, adjoining the rear gardens of properties along Alexandra Road, and the 5 metre high racking along the eastern site boundary. And I've just got a zoomed in plan just so that you can see a bit more clearly. So it's these orange sections indicating the location of the racking. So this slide just shows the elevation plans for both sets of the racking. So the next slide just shows case officer site photos. So these show views of the development when taken from within the Sunderland Industrial Estate. You can see the 5 metre high racking in this image here, and the 3 metre high racking is hidden from view by way of the well enclosed nature of the site. So I visited some of the gardens of the objectors, and these photos show views from within 25 Alexandra Road, and you can see the storage racking just over the top of the garage, this property. And these are further views from 25 Alexandra Road. Again, you can see at a distance the storage racking and an existing industrial building within the industrial estate. And these are further photos taken from within number 25 Alexandra Road. And again, the storage racking is in the distance. So this photo shows a view from 27 Alexandra Road, and this you can see the storage racking shown here. And then there's just some further photos that I took from within the garden. So again, you can see the storage racking projecting over the top of the boundary treatment. And this is the 5 metre high storage racking, not the 3 metre, which is not visible due to the height of the boundary treatment between the yard and neighbouring properties. And then these are further images. Again, you can see the storage racking from 27 Alexandra Road. So neighbouring residents that have objected to the scheme have submitted photos showing further views of the storage racking. These were submitted by number 25. So you can see the building materials stored on the racking increases its visual prominence when viewed from the gardens. And these are further images showing that. This photo was also submitted by number 25 Alexandra Road and just shows the storage racking when lit up at night. So there's no external lighting within the site. This is lighting from within the wider industrial estates. This is not something that the applicants have control over. And this photo was also submitted by a neighbouring resident, this time from number 27, and you can see the impact of the storage racking with the building materials on the top. So the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Right, we've got Councillor Anderson, Ward Councillor, speaking in objection, followed by Thomas Schofield in support.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. Good evening, colleagues. I'm in a bit of a difficult position here because I was brought in at the very last minute because the objectors and my ward colleague are all away on holiday at the moment. So I'm a little low on detail. What I will do is I will briefly read out a comment from one of the objectors and then a summary. The racking was put up without any consultation with neighbours and before planning consideration was given. Proximity and height of the racking is visually intrusive. Because of the height of the racking, which exceeds the height of our trees, the applicant uses a forklift truck to access the roof tiles, and it is noisy with their coming and going, reversing warnings and lifting of tiles, which is especially noticeable from the highest shelf. Because there is nothing to block out the noise, this carries into our garden and the house. They have a further set of racking which immediately abuts our border with them, but is at a lower height and beneath the height of the trees. The height is more satisfactory and the trees form a noise barrier. We already experience a high degree of noise from the yard, with the warehouses behind the tiling company, and this only exacerbates it. So those are the comments that the objectors wanted me to emphasise on their behalf. And if I could just reinstate the summary of the Parish Council's objection, that the grounds for objecting was that the proposal was overlooking, and it is overlooking because the people operating the equipment won't be able to, may be able to see into those gardens. There is clear loss of privacy, a loss of light overshowing, and noise. Now, I noticed in the officer's report the comment about noise as if it was somehow a new thing and nobody's complained about it. I'm sorry. We've had issues with noise at Sunderland's Yard for 25 years. It is an issue that I have been campaigning on for a long time, and it is a very significant problem that residents have to suffer, particularly because the original 4 barns were built and permission before conditions could control the hours of usage, which is another reason to worry about from the residents' point of view, and also design and appearance. So really what I'm saying, Chair, is just ask colleagues if they can find some way of overturning the officer's recommendation on this application. It is largely a little bit subjective about he says and she says. At the end of the day, hopefully from the pictures provided by the objectors, you can see just how intrusive this proposal is. Thank you, Chair.
Good evening, Chair and members. This application enables a long-standing employer to operate safely and efficiently. It's exactly the type of small-scale business adaptation that your local policies support. As such, I'm asking you to follow your planning officer's recommendation and approve the retention of the racking. Due to wider changes at the industrial estate and to meet customer needs, SIG has no other option but to store its outdoor bulky goods on vertical racking to remain competitive with other suppliers. The racking is essential to allow for the safe and efficient storages of these materials. Without this storage, the company would have to consider a costly relocation and the site could revert to a noisy HGV lorry parking. Approving this racking will primarily safeguard the jobs of those working at the SIG Kings Langley branch, but also the local contractors and small businesses which rely on their stock availability for their work. National policy places significant weight on supporting economic growth, and it supports the adaptation of existing local businesses, allowing them to remain agile and flexible. I acknowledge the objections received from neighbours. However, the officer's report concludes that there is no significant visual harm in terms of public amenity. The racking is not overbearing and is effectively screened and set back. Glimpsed private views from neighbouring gardens will quickly reduce as trees and vegetation continue to grow. We agree to the safeguarding condition of providing a noise impact assessment and will happily submit one in time. I would like to respectfully remind members that your officer recommends approval, and I hope you are able to support the application. Thank you for your time.
Right, members, over to you. Councillor Bristow. Councillor Bromham.
Thank you, Chair. Heather, could you pull up the site plan, please? Yes, please. Possibly the zoomed in one. Super, thank you very much. I must say I disagree with the officer's recommendations that the racks on the side facing the residential properties aren't overbearing. I mean, they just enormously are. That being said, it strikes me that there is a large amount of space still on the site where the free facing the residential properties could be presumably relocated to and still allow HGVs to turn and so on. I also just disagree in principle that granted a noise impact assessment will be undertaken, the applicant has agreed to that. If you've got forklifts making their turning reversing noise on the other side of a sort of 3-metre tall hedge, you are going to hear that. That is a loud and obnoxious thing. It just strikes me that it's completely inconsiderate to place the racking on the side facing the houses and that it could be happily relocated somewhere else on the site.
Yeah, just some observations. 5 metres doesn't seem particularly high to me, and they are. I can't see the scale on the drawing there, but it is quite a long way from the actual houses. Refusing permission for the racking won't resolve the noise issues. I think that's a separate thing, and I hope the business will be considerate. I agree, the sounds of the beeping sound of reversing vehicles is quite irritating. I believe that there might be other sounds which could be used as a kind of a hissing sound, which might be a little bit less obtrusive. Another thing that could be considered would be a sort of green screen that the business could put up, just out of consideration. I don't think that's particularly difficult to do. Yeah, I agree the provision of business premises is important, and presumably most of the residents knew that it was a business there operating before they, since 25 years ago was mentioned.
Anybody else? Councillor Allen.
I just wanted to explore that sort of chicken and egg argument. So how long has the business been there, and when was Alexandra Road built?
Shall we ask Councillor Anderson that one?
Councillor Anderson could explain that that site was actually a gasworks in the Victorian era, if you really want to go that far back. But what I will say is that this is a residential area, and the original 4 barns on the Sunderland estate, which doesn't include this site, date back to about 1971-ish, somewhere around there. But a lot of the barns, the newer barns, which includes this one, this business, are a lot more recent than that, and certainly the residents do predate the businesses.
Thank you. Yes, it's always a tricky one, isn't it? The coexistence between residential and commercial of any description, and obviously commercial develops different requirements, and in this case they've been put up with this tall racking. I think it seems to me difficult to refuse, but picking up what Councillor Brougham said, I'm sure it would be possible in some form or another to disguise this a bit more effectively than they have. Now, whether it would be, I don't know what the situation is between the boundary fence and the racking on the site of the commercial premises, whether they could plant something more long-term, like, evergreen trees there. But you could, certainly I would have thought, on the back of the racking, put some sort of, you get this sort of stuff that people use on their balconies and things that artificial leaves and things that would at least tone down the starkness of the orange barriers and the stuff that is on there, at least to give the residents some relief from the view. And as relation to the noise, with the height and the noise obviously don't correlate. You could have noise for forklifts on the 2-metre racking, so that's particularly an issue. But I do think it would be incumbent upon the applicant to do something to disguise this a little bit more effectively than they have.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a point before the members go to the vote in terms of the difference between loss of a view and visual intrusion. In planning terms, a view is very much a private aesthetic consideration. So if someone can view something out of their window, then that's generally not considered a material planning consideration. However, loss of outlook, and that would be generally that kind of visual intrusion, and this would be where your view from a window is significantly blocked. And then, if you've got a building that's quite close, and therefore it's visually intrusion. So we have to remember here that these gardens are of substantial length. So what we're not considering here is that these racks are overbearing, but that it has an impact on their private view because of the distance. It doesn't affect their overall outlook. So certainly, I think in terms of the appearance, while I sympathise with the homeowners, and I agree that the solution that the company put in, with particularly the orange colour, is not great. It is in the context of a long distance view, and in the background there are further industrial buildings. So I would certainly be very hesitant indeed to consider kind of these harm outlook at such a distance. In terms of noise, there is a condition that the case officer is recommending in terms of the noise impact assessment. When the results come through of that, then obviously there is the provision within that condition to implement the mitigation required to overcome the noise impacts. So whether that includes an hours restriction for the use of the racking. Obviously, we can't control the use of the yard. This is a long-standing business, but in terms of this specific planning permission, we could potentially control in terms of hours, or there could be other ways in terms of different ways of, obviously there needs to be health and safety on site in terms of reversing forklifts, but whether there are less intrusive ways. Again, these can be explored through the noise impact assessment and the mitigation measures proposed. Thank you, Chair.
While we're talking about mitigating factors, is there any mitigation that can be applied about the lighting? Because it seems like the lighting in the evening can exacerbate the intrusion.
The difficulty is that the lighting isn't within the site, it's external to the site, so I'm not sure how we would be able to control that within the scope of this application when it's not within the control of the applicant.
Yeah, looking at the broader picture, you look at the map, the areas along the canal historically were industrial, and you've got the Ovaltine factory on the other side of the river, and I've noticed similar situations in Berkhamsted where you've got industrial sites in inappropriate places, really, and I'm wondering strategically that these sorts of sites ought to be, there ought to be incentivisation or facilitation for these sorts of sites to move to places which have better access to main roads, not going through housing estates, and these sorts of areas which are right in the middle of a residential area should be should move towards being residential. Is that something that we can influence?
The answer is no. It's this application.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Would it be possible to add some sort of small clause just to say that the company will undertake best endeavours to minimise visual intrusion? Yeah, we've had several, there's lots of small things that you could place, either soundproof fencing or something small on the back of the racking to make sure that there's not a load of glowing roof tiles being projected into those people's back gardens every night. That seems eminently fair and reasonable to me.
So, in terms of an informative, as opposed to a condition, that would be possible to add so it wouldn't be a requirement, but it would be more of a suggestion in the interest of being good neighbours, and to consider alternative ways of having that facing racking, how that racking faces the neighbours. We could have that as an informative.
Thank you, Phil. I would urge that we adopt that as part of the motion.
So I think we're talking about some sort of screening, as suggested by Councillor Williams just now. Right. Councillor Walker.
Yes, Chair. Would it be possible to just have a look at the picture again from the garden of the racking? Because from my memory, there was an industrial building behind the racking, which seemed to stand a lot higher than the racking. So, these situations are always very difficult to be pointed out when you're trying to mix oil and water. It don't work. It showed the racking quite clearly, I thought, with the industrial building behind it, a green industrial building behind it. Yeah, there, you can actually just, there we are. Take the racking away, you are still looking at an industrial building. Now it's green, which makes it probably a little bit more acceptable than bright orange. Now the bright orange, I don't think is the racking, I think it's probably the roofing material. But I think it's very hard to stop this. We can't control the lighting. We certainly can't ask them to move and become a residential site. And that isn't what we're discussing tonight. What we're looking at is somebody looking at an industrial building, which they haven't even mentioned in their complaint. Looking at the racking, I think if you can disguise it, let's get on with it and move on, because you're not going to stop it. Thank you.
I was just going to say I support the proposal for the informative. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further comments? If not, can I have with an informative, can I have a proposer for officer's recommendation? Councillor Durrant. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Walker. Can I have a show of hands? Those in favour of officer's recommendation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 in favour. Those against? Nil. Abstentions? 3. Right, officer's recommendations. Before we close the meeting, we've got item 6 on the agenda.
Thank you.
Update on appeals.
Thank you, Chair. So I will very, very briefly introduce the report. This is the appeals update covering the period 1st to the 31st of August, and therefore it doesn't include the Haresford Farm decision that was issued this week that allowed the 86 unit scheme. So the Haresford Farm decision came through this week. In terms of appeals lodged, 6.1, there were 4, of which 3 were householders. We've received up to the end of 2025, up to the end of August 2025, we've received 33 appeals, and that compares to 61 this time last year and in 2023. So significantly less appeals this year being received. In terms of appeals dismissed, so the second one, which was the 40 Pancake Lane, and it's an interesting one because it provides an example where conditions relating to controlling annexes has held firm. There's often a debate at committee in terms of the provision of a residential annex and that it can't be used for independent dwellings. This was an application where they sought to turn it into independent dwelling, and the inspector said, no, that condition is necessary. If it was an independent dwelling, it would cause harm. So that's an example where that condition is held firm. And numbers 3 to 7 are all the same site. 1, the Orchard in Kings Langley, all 5 appeals dismissed. The inspector considered that the subdivision of the front garden into private garden spaces would have a harmful impact on the character and appearance of the area. And there was a general concern over the level of outdoor amenity space, and therefore, I guess, overall had overdevelopment concerns. In terms of appeals allowed, obviously the principal one there is land west of Leighton Buzzard Road. So obviously the very large application went to public inquiry and has been allowed. From a council perspective, from an officer perspective, that's a disappointing decision. The inspector gave considerable weight to the, in his or her words, the chronic undersupply of housing, and this outweighed any harms that the inspector had identified. And those harms the inspector, in any case, gave were, in their view, on the low or very low scale.
Sorry, Phil, were some of those not very serious harms to heritage?
So, yep, I've got it here. So the harms the inspector identified related to landscape impacts, heritage impacts, progression of the local plan, flood risk, and loss of best and most versatile agricultural land. But these were all considered to be on the low or very low scale of harm, and therefore they were not, they didn't outweigh the benefits of the scheme. The other 2 allowed appeals also follow a similar theme in terms of the weight given to our housing land supply position. The inspector in 20 Bourne End Lane described it as a woeful position and gave significant weight to the development's contribution towards housing and land supply. And the one on the land of Dixon's Wharf, again, the planning inspector applied the tilted balance and concluded that the benefits are clearly outweighed. So the harms are clearly outweighed by the benefits. In terms of appeals withdrawn, there's 2 appeals that were due to go to public inquiry, now withdrawn, including the original National Grid proposal. Members will also be aware of the second application that was granted at committee. Once the JR period had passed for that subsequent permission, they then withdrew their appeal. In respect of enforcement, relatively quiet month in terms of appeals. 1 enforcement notice appeal was dismissed, though that appeal was limited to grounds F and G only, which are that the requirements are excessive or they needed more time. So that wouldn't ultimately have changed the need to require the requirement to comply. It would have just changed the requirements or given them more time. But in both cases, the inspector dismissed those grounds. So in terms of the overall statistics, so we have that on 6.9. I think it's an absolutely excellent record so far this year in terms of appeal performance. Only 16.7% of appeals have been allowed, and 3/4 approximately have been dismissed. So yes, that, as I say, that's an excellent appeals performance. I did note in the previous appeals update to members that there was a risk in terms of majors decisions and exceeding that 10% threshold. I have re-looked at the figures, and it's not quite as dire as I had thought. The current situation with the Haresford Farm appeal being allowed is that we are now at approximately 8.3%, and there are 2 further appeals going through the system, both the Sang appeals, and if both of those appeals are allowed, then we would exceed the 10% threshold, and then could expect a letter in April next year, effectively asking us to explain our performance in that regard. It's not an automatic placement into special measures, but we would receive a letter asking us to explain ourselves if we exceeded that 10%. And then finally, in terms of costs, we did have a costs claim against the council for land west of Leighton Buzzard Road. The landscaping refusal was added as a supplementary reason for refusal. Officers did feel very strongly that there were strong grounds, but it is a salutary lesson in terms of making sure that the appropriate reasons for refusal are included with the decision. Whenever they are added late, you run a very real risk of a cost application. And then finally, the orchard. The appellant there also made claims for costs against the council, but all 5 were refused. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Phil. We note the report on appeals. Agreed. Thank you. Close the meeting at 10:25. Right.